Alrighty, so in this video what I want to do is I want to try to get our master server onto a different Photon instance than our game servers. So I want the game servers to be able to be started and stopped individually so that they're not tied specifically to the same instance as the master server. And this will allow us to test the ability for game or region servers to disconnect, and we can play around with a variety of different scenarios to make sure we've made things relatively resilient. And test things like timeouts and what happens if a server goes down or gets overloaded or whatever. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. What I have right here is I have our deploy folder, and our deploy folder is where our executables are for Photon. And also it has two configuration files that we're going to take a look at, photonserver.config and photoncontrol.exe.config. So I have those both open here, one there, and one here. So on the photoncontrol.config, we see we have a bunch of parameters, and I don't think any of these parameters are going to be particularly useful. Looking at things like the counter service name, we don't need any of this. What we really need to do is, I think right here, we have instances, default and load balancing. I think that is going to be what happens down here as far as being able to start and stop the individual instances. So let's keep that in mind. Let's move that over to the side, and let's scroll down. So we have... let's see here. So we have multiple instances, and right here we just have, this is the load balancing instance, I believe. This is the default instance. So what I want to do is I want to create another instance, and that might require, actually I do believe it will require me to create another UDP listener. So our game servers will actually be on different ports than our master server, which makes sense because it's a different literal instance of the application. So I'm going to, I'm just going to throw some stuff at the wall and see what happens. So for the default, I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy all, well actually, I'm going to, let's see here. I'm going to copy all of this right here and just paste it down here, and then end default. And I'm going to go ahead and call this instance game instance 1. And we're going to change his UDP listener to be on port 5056. And we'll change that in our configuration as well. And I'm going to be, as we copy and paste things over, I'm going to be deleting all the comments. So we have our UDP listeners now, but the only other parameter that we should need for creating another instance is going to be, oh, it looks like we need a runtime. So I'm going to take that, copy, and paste it down here. And it might be easier if I just split the window here. By the way, Visual Studio Code is an excellent editor, which I like a lot. So over here we have our game instance 1, and over here we're going to copy stuff over. So we also have this applications tag. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that over. And then inside of applications, we have Buzz MMO Game 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this over, paste it here into applications, and then I'm going to comment it out down here. So just go ahead and the command to do that in Visual Studio Code is control /. It'll comment that out. So now in our default instance, we now no longer have a Buzz MMO Game 1. But over here on Game Instance 1, we've configured a new instance, and we now have Buzz MMO Game 1 here. So I want to go ahead and change the default application for this instance to Buzz MMO Game 1. Now, I think this is actually going to work, but I think we do need to tell Photon Control about it. So just to recap the changes I made to the configuration, on the left-hand side, you see a whole new game instance 1 directly underneath the configuration root element. And on the right-hand side, we've commented that out over there. So now what I think I'm going to do is jump over here into our Photon Control, and I think I'm going to let it know about my instance. So I'm going to come over here and just paste right there, game instance 1 right next to default. That should work. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. But that's what we did there. Let's go ahead and go out of full screen here, and I'll pop open our Photon Control here. So again, we just changed this value. Then I'm going to exit the Photon Control. Actually, I'm going to go to default, and I'm going to say stop application. Before I started recording, I did have the actual default instance running, so we'll close that out. And then I'm just going to completely exit Photon Control and restart it. And the application start tag does not match the end tag of application. So let's go ahead and nuke Photon Control again. It looks like I made a slight mistake on my closing tag. You guys probably caught that before I did. So just make sure you have valid XML, obviously. Let's open up Photon instance or Photon Control again. And now we right click, and now we have game instance 1 and default right here. And I think we're getting pretty close to what I want, but let's test it before we migrate over game instance 2. So I'm going to open up my log. Oh, actually, before I do that, I'm going to jump into our configuration here, jump over into server region, config, and go to game1.debug. And I'm going to change its address to point to our new port, which is 5056. Okay, with that out of the way, I'm going to open up my log so we can keep track of what's going on there. They should all... Whoops. I have to recompile, don't I? So I'm going to hit F6 and wait 10 million years for this solution to build. And then jump back into Log Fusion. I'm going to go ahead and preemptively clear out all the logs, so all 3 logs are empty. Now, despite the fact that they're different instances and different processes, the log pathing should not be different, meaning Log Fusion should pick up on these logs. So I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to start off by starting our default instance. So that's going to be over here in master log. We're going to get a... so we get our game server 2, and we get our master server started. Awesome. So now I'm going to right-click over here and go to game instance 1, and unfortunately there is no start as application available. So that's interesting. So it seems that the Photon control is not allowing me to start more than one instance as an application. Let's verify that. I'm going to go to default, and I'm going to stop that as an application. So we nuke that, then go to game instance 1, start as application, and we should get a message here in app, game server app. We get connected to the master server, then eventually we'll get an error saying it can't connect to the master server because our default instance is stopped. So I think the potential solution, let's go ahead and nuke game instance 1. I think the solution here is going to be to go to game instance 1 and install it as a service. All right, service installed, game instance 1. Now I'm going to come over here to default and say start as application. All right. Now I'm going to open up my services. So these are my services. All I did was went to my start menu and I literally just typed in services. And you can go ahead and open up your local services. And I don't know what it's going to install it as. I think it told me, but I completely forgot. I suppose it was caught on video. But I can't rewind from here. It should be maybe Photon socket server, game instance 1. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that this is not set to startup type of automatic. I'm going to make sure it's started as manual. When I start my computer, I don't want this instance to begin. So I guess we're going to have to use our services panel to control starting and stopping our other instances, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and see what happens. I'm going to clear out, since our default server is running, our game server 2 is started, so I'm going to clear out my logs, and all I'm going to do here is I'm going to select Photon Socket Server Game Instance 1, and I'm going to hit Start. And we're going to see what happens. Hopefully something good. As you see, connecting to Master Server, registered Game Server, and over here, Server Game Server 1 started. Awesome. So I think that's the process that we're going to go through when managing our discrete server instances. And again, this will allow us to test things like disconnecting. Stuff and things. Let's go ahead and do the exact same thing to our other game server. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to stop this service. Just nuke that. And then I'm going to come down here to Photon Control and go to Default Stop as Application. Get rid of that. And then I'm going to jump back into my configuration right here. And I'm going to take this game instance 1 and I'm just going to copy and paste it, because we already have this all configured. Obviously, you could set different parameters here. These are just the defaults that I stole off the default instance. Let's just plop it down here. So now we have 2 instances of game instance 1 configured. I'll scroll through slowly here. I'll try to scroll through slowly. And for the second one, not surprisingly, I'm going to change the name to game instance 2. Game instance 2. And then down here, we see that in our default application, we have BuzzMMO Master, but now we have BuzzMMO Game 2, and we want to move these parameters over here. And the fastest way to do that, I guess, would just be copy that and paste it there. So that updates all that. Now make sure to comment out BuzzMMO Game 2 from the default. So now our default instance literally only has BuzzMMO Master on it. All the other applications have been commented out. And then over here, the last thing we got to do is make sure that our default application is set to BuzzMMO Game 2. Otherwise, you will get an error during startup. So now we need to tell the Photon control about Buzz MMO Game 2. So I'm going to put this on my clipboard, hop on over to our Photon control config, and simply add it right here. And while I'm at it, I'm going to just remove load balancing. I don't care about load balancing. So now we just have default game instance 1. Whoops, it's called game instance 2, isn't it? It's not called Buzz MMO Game 2. I'm stupid. Okay, so there we go. That's our new configuration for Photon control. So move that off to the side. And what we have here, again, is game instance 1, game instance 2. And we got to change the port too, so make sure we change that to 5057. Now I'm going to close out of Photon control, exit Photon control. I'm going to start it again. I'm not going to start them just yet, because remember, so now we have game instance 1, game instance 2, default, and for some reason load balancing is still there, but I don't really care. Okay, so now for game instance 2, I'm going to go ahead and say install a service. But I'm not going to start it yet. Don't start it yet, because we still have to configure it. So now service installed. That's awesome. And that's our configuration. I think that's going to be it for our configuration here. So we can close out of that. We can also close out of that as well. And now I'm going to go to game2.debug.json, and I'm going to change the address to using port 5057. And then hit F6 to make sure that our updated configuration gets copied over. And yeah, we should be good to go in theory. It looks like we can actually start as service and stop as service from Photon control, so that's really cool. So I'm going to go to default, and I'm going to say start as application. Oh, another thing. While that starts, I'm going to come over here to my services. I'm going to hit F5 to refresh, and I see game instance 2 right here. I'm going to double-click on that and change the startup type to manual. Again, these are not services that I want to have started when I power on my computer, because all they're going to do is they're going to sit around, they're going to try to connect to the master server, then they're not going to be able to, and then they're going to throw an error, and you know, everything will be awful. So now we have this all set up. We have our Photon CLR, don't care about that. So now I should be able to right-click, go to game instance 1, and say start service. And give it a sec. Game server 1 connected. And now I should be able to right-click, game instance 2, start service. And we are connected. So now we can individually control each 3 of our servers, kind of simulating if they're on different computers. And again, this opens up a lot of opportunity to be able to test certain things. I mean, in theory, what you could do is you could certainly go about making another Photon instance that has both the master server and the game servers. So then, like, when you're thinking, okay, I don't care about testing the resiliency of this stuff. I just want everything to get started. In fact, I think I'm going to do that, actually. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop both of these guys, and I'm going to stop the default. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the default instance be everything. And then I'm going to create another instance that has the master server. And the reason for that is because in certain circumstances, I want to go to default, hit start as application, have everything started up. In other instances, I want to start each server manually. And I think, I don't know, just something that popped into my head. So let's go ahead and reopen those configuration files. Again, you can find them in your deploy folder. So I'm going to go ahead and open those. And with those open, we now have our Photon server.config. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here to our default instance, and I'm going to re-enable both of these. I don't know if Photon's going to let me do this, actually, but we are going to do an experiment. So do that. I'll split the window. I'm going to scroll up here, and I'm going to do basically the exact same thing. I'm going to take game instance 2, and I'm going to take it, copy, and paste it, and then we will rename it to master server. Call it master server, port 5055, so just our default port that we've been using for our default instance, and then come over here to Buzz MMO server master and paste that in, and then change that to that. So really straightforward. Now we need to let Photon control, we need to tell it about our new instance. So I'm going to go to Photon control, come down here, add in Buzz MMO master. And then I'm going to come over here, close out of Photon control, restart it. I'm going to come up here to, I'm going to master server. I'm going to say install as service. And then I'm going to come over here to my services, refresh, go to master server, turn it on to manual startup type. And now I should be able to hit default and everything will start, but I also should be able to say master server start service. And it started. I should be able to go to game instance 1, start service. And it started, and game instance 2, start service. And then for other instances where I don't care, I can just hit the default and everything will start up itself. So, yeah. Actually, there is one small issue with that, and that is the port numbers. You guys might have thought of that before I did. So we have our UDP listeners. I think I'm going to try to do something a little clever here for our default instance. I think our default instance, since it's going to be used for everything, I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to add a listener for both 5056 and 5057. Because right now, it only listens to 5055, but in our configuration, we are going to be hitting 5056 and 5057 for our region servers. So when we start all the servers underneath the port 5055, then they're not going to be able to connect to 5056 and 5057. It would require a bunch of nasty stuff in our configuration. But I think this will solve that problem. So I'm going to come over here and stop all of our services. And they should all be stopped by now. And now I should be able to, I'm going to clear out the logs. So, whoops, clear all logs. Now I'm going to go to default and say start as application. And in theory, we should get each one of our servers started. So again, when I just want to start everything up, and check that out, it works. So that's super exciting. Okay, so I'm going to come over here back to default. I'm going to stop it as an application, and then I'm going to go to master server, start as service, and we'll just work with game server 1 for now, or game instance 1. So I'm going to start game instance 1. So what I want to do is I want to write code in that will unregister this game server, because right now if I were to come over here and say game instance 1 stop service, and then come over here, game instance 1 start service, we should get an error in our buzz server master. We do, because it was never removed from the dictionary. So as you see, and again, this is something we wouldn't be able to test if we hadn't split up our instances. So that's why I think that's really cool. So let's go ahead and get started and work on some code to handle disconnecting. So the first thing that I want to do is, there are kind of two things about disconnecting, two scenarios that I envision in my head. The first scenario is that for some reason the Buzz MMO server region tells the server that he wants to disconnect. And what circumstances would that be? Well, maybe it got overloaded. I don't know. Maybe there was a bug, maybe whatever. But there should be a way to disconnect that. But I suppose a region server wouldn't really need a mechanism to notify the master server about a disconnect, because the master server can just listen in to the peer and see when the peer disconnects, then it removes itself. So I think actually I'm going to jump over into, I'll full screen this to get some more screen space here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over here into BuzzMMO server components, game instance. I think I'm just going to remove the concept of unregistering a server from the interface. So we still have the register server, obviously, where we notify it about our configuration so the clients know where to connect. But I don't think the region server is going to notify the master server that it wants to be unregistered in any circumstance, because if it did, it would just literally disconnect from the master server. And that's more reliable, because if there's like a network problem or something like that, we would also want the server to be disconnected. So what we need to do is, with that out of the way, we can go into BuzzMMO server master into our game instance system, and we can remove the unregister server method. And I suppose, why do we have a fiber here? Is there any reason why I have a fiber here? Probably not. Let's delete it. And if I need it, I'll write it again. Okay, so I suppose on the dispose method, on the dispose method, we could go ahead and just, when this system is disposed, we can go ahead and remove it from the server queue. So, and I don't think this is going to work actually quite yet, but it is something that I want to have work here soon. So I'm going to say unregister server, this, on our server queue, and of course that method doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to go ahead and alt-enter it. So now I void unregister server, game instance system, and we'll just call this system. And for this, what we're going to do is we need to try to see if it's in the server's list. And I think there's a servers try remove. Yeah, this is cool. So try remove, remember this is our concurrent dictionary, so it handles, we can work with it without having to synchronize on a fiber or having to do any locking or anything nasty like that. But try remove looks like its signature just looks really, really cool. It takes in a key and then it outs a instance of what was found, it returns a Boolean. So what we can do here is I can say game instance, well actually, we really don't need that, actually, because we already have an instance of the game instance system that we're trying to remove. But whatever, because it's the only signature, we do have to provide our system. So we'll just call this, I don't know, out system. I don't know, just garbage variable. If, you know, sometimes for garbage variables, I just put in an underscore just to indicate that it's a useless parameter or a variable. But I actually really only use that for lambdas and not for local variables. So I'm going to say if not servers try remove, and for the GUID we need the GUID, the key of the server, which is accessible via system.context.config.uniqueID. And then we'll do out system, and then I'm going to, if this happens, I'm simply just going to log an error. Well, I'm going to log a warning. Could not unregister. Let's make sure this is could not register server system. I'm going to alias out config. Let's go ahead and take that, extract that, config. There we go. So I can do config.name/config.uniqueID. Could not unregister server because it was not found, or because it was not registered. And then simply return. And that's it. Okay, so what if we did? Honestly, at this point, all I'm going to do is say log info server config name with ID config unique ID at config UDP connection has been unregistered. And there we go. That's our unregistered server, and it should happen when the system is disposed. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F6. Now, I do believe this should cause the restart behavior that we rely on, even though they are, and it does, and that's awesome. And it also restarts the game server, which is cool. So now our game server 1 is registered. So I don't think this is going to work. So I'm going to right-click, go to game instance 1, and I'm going to say, how about restart service? Don't think it's going to get unregistered. Yep, it did not get unregistered. Why didn't it get unregistered? Well, it didn't get unregistered because the dispose method of our game instance system was never invoked, and that's going to be problematic. So we need a way for our game instance system to be disposed, and I think I know a great way to do that. We should be overloading iGame instance region server master inherits from client system base, which implements iinternal system. No, isystem base, and isystem base does isystem base, and that does disposable. Okay, that's a bit of a hierarchy. I probably could have used the hierarchy explorer to find that. But what I was trying to get at is there's two important things here. Game instance system, these are instantiated, and we can find that out if we look at our application. No, our master server context, which is basically a similar thing. We see that we loop through all of our systems and we say instance per lifetime scope, right? And what that means to AutoFac is it says, okay, every time in this particular lifetime scope, remember, each client gets its own lifetime scope. All of the objects instanced per lifetime scope are attached to that lifetime scope. And what's great about that is AutoFac, it should, unless the behavior changed, knows about disposable. So when you dispose a lifetime scope and it has a registered disposable on it, and that object has been created, the dispose method should be invoked. So it looks like we're not disposing our lifetime scope. So we need to fix that. So the lifetime scope is handled by our base context. So if you recall, that's going to be in our server, I believe. Is it? Yeah, client context. And we have our client scope equals application container begin lifetime scope. What I want to do here is I want to scroll down to where it is. Oh, on disconnect it is disposed right there, so that's interesting. Let's make sure that line of code is being hit. Or wait a sec. Did on our master server we have our region server context? It does inherit from client context, and we're not overriding any methods. So let's try to figure this out. I'm going to put a breakpoint there. Figure out why that's not being called, and I'm going to put a breakpoint in our guy right here, because that should be invoked. And then I'm going to go ahead and debug attached Unity debugger. No. Debug attached process, and I'm going to find the Photon server instance that is responsible for our master server. And this is going to be a little bit... I have a feeling this is going to be a little bit of a pain, because there's going to be multiple socket servers. Where are you? I know you're in here. Remember, you have to start as administrator to do this, because it is an administrative process. You know, I'm not seeing it. Maybe I'm blind? Hold on, I'm going to pause while I track this down. Oh, right, it's a service, so it's going to be under... I've never debugged a service before, actually, to be perfectly honest. I don't know what it would be under. So you're saying we can't debug? That would make me sad. Well, we could debug if we started as an application. So what I'm going to do is... I think what I'm going to do, actually... So the master server, I'm going to stop it as a service. I'm actually going to remove it as a service. Then I'm going to go to the master server and I'm going to start it as an application. And then, just for good measure, I'll hit F6 to recompile. So I'm starting it as an application, not a service, so I can debug it. And in order to start it as an application, you have to remove it as a service. But we don't need it to be a service, because remember, we can start one instance as an application with Photon control, right? So we just need to start the master server as an application, and then the game instance servers as services. It didn't seem to have wanted to start, so let's go ahead and hit that again and check the logs. Oh, actually, I just found a bug, I think. Okay, start as application. So let's watch this. Let's watch the logs. Something should come up, hopefully. I would imagine. It really doesn't want to start as an application. Let's go ahead and restart Photon control. I'm leaving this on video just because this is just the debugging tip I would give here. Okay, application, start as application. Okay, nothing there. Potentially something would be in our master server log right there. So let's open that guy up. Let's clear him, and let's hit start as application harder. Not seeing anything there. Okay. And I managed to fix it. What I did, or maybe hopefully fixed it, what I did was I stopped the game server 1 as a service. I stopped that, then I closed out Photon control, then I opened it back up, and then I started it as an application. I started master server as an application. All right, so let's go to game instance 1 and let's start service. And we're registered. Now let's debug this guy. So attach to process and find our Photon socket server. It's always easier to sort by managed code there. Photon socket server attached. So the thing we're attached to is only the master server now. And now that we've attached the debugger, let's come over here to game instance 1 and let's say stop service. Let's see if any of this code is getting hit. Really doesn't seem to be. So on disconnect was never invoked. And And now, unfortunately, if I try to start this again, let's make sure the debugging is working. I'm going to put a breakpoint on register server. Whoops, there we go. On register server. And it's unregistered. And the client scope is disposed. And that's disposed. Huh. So it looked like it took a minute to disconnect. You know what? I think I know why. I think I know how to fix this. So the code was working. My assumptions about autofac were correct. But the problem is we are not disconnecting from the master server when the region server shuts down. So let's hop over into our application here. And we have our connect to master server, and then we have our create server peer, and it creates the peer and it does the on disconnect and blah blah blah. And then we do application dispose. So the master server, this needs to do is this needs to be notified when the application is disposed, when the application dies, because that's what happens right here on teardown, which is a Photon method that gets invoked when our server stops. So we need a way from the master server peer to be notified when the teardown happens so we can do a disconnect. And I think that'll fix the issue. So I think one way to do this, and that's nasty, nasty file. I really don't like this file. One way to do this would be, wait a second, is this the file I don't like? Yeah, this is the one I hacked together, wasn't it? For our game server context, for our server context, I think I'm going to add an event. Over here on top, I'm going to say well, not on top, but above the constructor, public event action on disconnected. Does that follow the same? Because I know I had a thing here. Yeah, on disconnected. I'll just follow the same wording for that. So public event action on disconnected. Or how about on disposed? On disposed. Okay. So we have our on disposed, and now down here on our dispose, I guess I'm going to do on dispose, and then oh come on, you can do it. There we go. Invoke. So remember to add in the null check operator. Now, the only thing I'm worried about now is if our subclasses are invoking our base dispose method. So I'm going to go ahead and search for, whoops, wrong way. There are no overriding members. Okay, so just be aware that when you do create a subclass of this class, make sure to call the base dispose so the onDispose method gets invoked. So now I'm going to jump over into our master server peer. And I'm going to say, I'm going to do a couple interesting things here. I'm going to say application.onDisposed. Wait a sec, did I do on? Yeah, change it to onDisposed because whatever. Then I'm going to do application disposed. Now, I'm not writing this as a anonymous method or a lambda or whatever for a reason. But we'll see that reason in a moment here. So on application disposed, what we're going to do, actually, do I want to do? I'll do on application disposed. I always, as you see with the way I name events, I'm not very, I sometimes use a certain language, sometimes another. I really need to get a naming scheme for that locked in stone. Anyway, on application disposed, what we want to do is simply disconnect. And disconnect is a method that comes from Photon, it does. And it disconnects the client. So awesome. Now the next thing I want to do, however, is on disconnect. What I want to do is I want to say application or underscore application dot on disposed minus equals on application disposed. So if the master server disconnects from us, we don't want to leave around an event handler, which will cause a memory. Not only will it cause a memory leak, but potential issues or an exception. We want to clean that up when we disconnect from the master server. But when the application gets disposed, we want to initiate that disconnecting. So in theory, this will work, I think. Why do we have a scope in here? What do we use the scope for anyway? Oh yeah, because we are a system factory, of course, because this class is like a hodgepodge of like 4 different components copied and pasted into one. Like I said, it's awful. I hate it. Anyway, I'm going to hit F6 because this should fix our problem. And I'm going to clear out all my logs. And this should trigger a restart for both master app, and it does. And should also trigger a restart for our game instance server. So let's give it a second to go ahead and... Oh no, I stopped it. Derp. All right, let's start a service. Give it a second, and we should have a registered server. And now we have a registered server. Now I'm going to right-click, go to Game Instance 1, and I'm going to say Stop Service. And we're not... Master server peer disconnect. We're still not getting that disconnect notification. I'm going to pause the video for a moment because I'm pretty sure it's going to come in here in a couple seconds. Well, that's interesting. We got 2 dispose notifications. We can figure that out in the next video. I'm still really curious as to why it's not disconnecting that peer. So I wonder if... Wanda. I wonder if our dispose is not getting called. So we do tear down application dispose, and all application dispose does is on disposed. Is it possible that... Well, our on disconnect happens when we disconnect. So we don't need to disconnect again. And that should send that notification to the master server. This is really interesting behavior we got here. Because when we do peer, peer does MMO peer base. MMO peer base has an on disconnect, which does client context on disconnect, which disposes the systems and disposes the scope. Actually, that might be why we're getting the messages twice, because the systems dispose loops through all the systems and disposes them, and then when we do the client scope dispose, it redisposes them. So we'll figure that out in the next video, but I still really am curious as to why it's not working. I guess in the meantime, I'm just going to kind of monkey patch this in. I am going to go ahead and jump over into server components, game instance. I am going to write a void unregister server method. And with that in place, we're going to get an error in our server's master systems region, because we now need to implement that method. And what's that method going to do? Well, it's going to do the same thing as dispose. It's going to say server queue unregister server this. Then, so make sure to add that method. Then in our server region, in our system's master game instance system, on dispose, I'm simply going to do proxy.unregister server. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit F6, because this should cause both servers to restart, because we made a change to our BuzzMMO server. And, okay, master server's restarted. Wait on the game server. Oh, whoops, that's not started, is it? Okay, start a service. We should get a register. And we do. Stop service. We should get an unregister. And we don't. All right, well, in general, things are working better, and we got the configuration working right. I'm going to end it here. In the next video, we're gonna deal with the issues. We're going to figure out why. I'm going to do some research on my own, why it's taking so long for it to disconnect. And I imagine the disconnect should pop in here at any second now. You know, I don't want to say it could be a logging issue. Maybe something isn't getting flushed. I don't know. And it's disconnected. Okay, so now that it's disconnected, just to verify, I can go ahead into Game Instance 1, start a service, and we should get a new... And we do. Okay, so that's working fine. It's just the lag, the latency, we have an issue there. And we'll figure that out in the next video. And with that, we will see you guys next week.